Hello, great halls. Welcome back to yet another insightful lesson. So, in today's lesson, we're working with interest, and the question we have with us today reads as follows. Lambert realizes that the 105% home loan from the bank will not be enough to cover all his costs. His friend is willing to give him a loan of 7,000 to be paid back in full after 2 years with the following conditions. First condition, simple interest at 11.75% per annum for the first year. Second condition, 12% per annum compounded half yearly for the second year. So the first question reads as follows. And the question says, calculate the compounded half-yearly interest rate for 6 months. So going back to the conditions there, the second condition, we've been told that he has to pay 12% per annum, which means 12% per year. But that 12% is compounded half-yearly, okay? So that means that 12% has to be divided into 2 because it's half-yearly. It's not for the whole year, it's for the whole year, but he will pay it half-yearly, like he will pay for the first half of the year and second half of the year. So now they want to know how much interest he has to pay in 6 months. And we know that 6 months is half a year. So this is how you're going to do it. You're just going to say 12%, because this is the percent that he has to pay for the whole year, okay? Divide by 2, because we know that in 12 months in a year, there is 2 6 months. Okay, so now this means 12 divided by 2. That means he'll pay 6% in 6 months, if that makes sense. Okay, so now we're going to go to question 2.2.2, which says manually calculate the total amount Lambert will have to pay his friend at the end of 2 years. So this friend has borrowed, or rather loaned Lambert 7,000 rands, okay, with those conditions there, and they're asking us to calculate the amount of money that Lambert has to pay back to his friend in full, the total amount, okay? So this is how we're going to do it. I hope most of you have noticed that we have both simple and compound interest there. So for the first year, it's going to be simple interest, and for the second year, it's going to be compound interest, okay? This is how we're going to do it. So we're going to start with year 1, the first year, okay? We want to know that by the end of the first year, how much does Lambert has to pay his friend back, okay? So we're going to say year 1 equals 2. So we know that Lambert borrowed, or rather loaned, 7,000 rands, okay? So this 7,000 rands, when he pays it back, by the end of the first year, it needs to come back with an additional interest of 11.75%, okay? So what do we do now? We want to add 11.75% of this amount to this amount. How do we do that? We say 7,000 plus, now in brackets, we are calculating 11.75% of 7,000, and then we're going to add them together, okay? So here we say 11.75%. 11.75 over 100 is the same as 11.75%, okay? Multiply by how much did he borrow? He borrowed 7,000. Okay, so it's going to be 7,000, which is the amount he borrowed, plus here we're calculating the interest that he has to pay back with the money. Okay, just gonna click that on the calculator and say 11.75 divided by 100 multiplied by 7,000. So how much interest does he have to pay by the end of the first year? He has to pay an interest of 822 rands 50 cents, okay? So we add these two amounts together now. So we say 7,000 plus this amount, it's just going to be 7,822 rands 50 cents. So this is the amount of money that he has to pay back by the end of the first year. Okay, so we're done with the first year. He only had to pay an additional 11.75% interest. Okay, so now we go to the second year. But remember, second year is compounded interest. It's not simple interest, it's compounded interest, and it's compounded half yearly. So that means that we have to calculate the amount that he has to pay for the first half of the year, and also calculate the amount he has to pay for the second half of the year. Okay, so this is how we're going to do. We can just say first half, or first 6 months, actually first 6 months, which is the first half of the year. Okay, so now this is compounded interest. He didn't borrow 7,000, he basically borrowed 7,822 rands 50 cents at the beginning of the second year. This is the money that he is owing by the end of the first year. So it'll be the amount he owes at the beginning of the second year. Okay, it's basically his closing balance for the year and his opening balance for the next year, for the second year. Okay, so we're going to use this amount. We're no longer working with 7,000, we're working with 7,000 and the interest for the first year. Okay, so for the first 6 months of the second year, it's going to be 7,822 rands 50 cents. Okay, plus, into brackets, we're calculating the interest. Okay, so we're going to say, remember we said that he has to pay 12% extra, 12% interest, but he will pay it twice. He will pay 6% first and another 6% on the other second half of the year. Okay, so here we're not going to say 12%, because remember we have divided the 12% into 2 halves of the year. So that means per 6 months he has to pay 6%. So for the first 6 months of the year, the interest rate will be 6%. So we're going to say 6 over 100 multiplied by the amount that he is owing at the beginning of the second year, which is the amount he was owing by the end of the first year. Okay, so we're going to say multiply by 7,822 rands 50 cents. Okay, so we're basically doing the same thing we did here, 7,822 rands 50 cents, plus now we calculate the interest for the first 6 months of the second year. So it's 6 over 100, 6 over 100 multiplied by 7,822 rands 50 cents. That gives us a total of 469 rands 35 cents, right? This is the interest that he has to pay for the first 6 months of the second year. Okay, so now we do what? We add them together to know the actual total amount he has to pay by the end of the first 6 months of the year. So we're just going to take this amount and say plus 7,822 rands 50 cents. So that means that by the end of the first 6 months of the second year, this person has to pay how much? 8,291.85 cents. Okay, so this is for the end. By the end of the the first 6 months of the second year, he'll be owing this amount. Okay, but we're not done, because we also have the other second half. We have the second half of the year as well. Okay, so now we're going to say second 6 months, which is the rest of the year. Okay, the remaining months of the year. So this was his closing balance by the end of the first 6 months of the second year. So that means it is also going to be the opening balance for the second 6 months of second year. Okay, so we're no longer working with 7,822 rands 50 cents now, but we're working with how much? 8,291 rands 85 cents. So we're going to say opening balance for second 6 months, which is 8,291.85 cents plus the interest. Now we're calculating the interest, right? Remember the interest rate is 6%. Okay, so 6 over 100 multiplied by this very same amount, 8,291.85. 8,291.855 plus, now we calculate the interest for the second 6 months of the year. 6 over 100 multiplied by 8,291.85. And the interest for the last 6 months is 497 rands 51 cents. Okay, we add them together now. Let's see, it's going to be plus 8,291.85. So our final answer is 8,781.36. So this is the total amount of money that Lambert has to pay his friend back. Okay, so Lambert loaned 7,000. He loaned 7,000 from his friend, ne? But by the end of the second year, ne, the total amount that he has to pay his friend back is 8,789 rands 36 cents. So this is how you work with interest, okay? You need to pay attention if it's simple interest or compound interest, and you also need to pay attention if you have to do both simple and compound in the same answer, okay? So this is how you guys were supposed to work with it. And now, just to confirm everything, to see if we really did our things the way we were supposed to, for the second year, which we have divided into two because we have been told that it's compounded half yearly, so we calculated first half and second half, ne? Just to make sure that you got your interest right. If you say 6% plus 6%, they give you the 12% that he had to pay back for the second year, you see? So 6 plus 6 both account for the 12%, that is the interest rate for the second year, which has been compounded half yearly, first half of the year and second half of the year. I really hope that this made sense to you. It's very much important for you to know this information. And thank you so much for watching the video. I hope that this lesson will be helpful to you guys. May goodness and grace lead you to the very heights of success.